The Mexican independence came to be through a succession of several revolutions led by different leaders. The first one, Miguel Hidalgo, a Catholic priest who protested against the Spanish government, unleashed a powerful ideological wave on Mexican people. He encouraged the idea of an independent Mexico with liberty from Spanish Empire and the imposed social structure. His ideas presided on several background causes. The Bourbon Reforms. The Bourbon Reforms were a set of policies that allowed the Spanish royalty to appoint Iberian officials to administer and rule over regions. This negatively affected the local sentiment, who previously had local Creole governments in power. People began to feel oppressed by non-native rulers. The social structure. The social structure of the Latin American society during the colonial times severely restricted any movement along the social pyramid. People were divided by their race, origin, and birthplace. At the top, there were the Peninsulares, people of white race who were born in Spain. They enjoyed the most amount of rights, as they were considered the purest representatives of the white race. Then followed the Creoles, whites who were born in Latin America. They enjoyed a limited amount of rights only because of their birthplace. Next were the mestizos, people of a combination of white and indigenous races. Mestizos were considered below the whites, but yet they had more availability than the classes below them. The lower classes were the mulattoes, lobos, indigenous populations, and African slaves. All of them were restricted from moving up the social ladder and any possible liberty. These two main reasons essentially sparked the Mexican Revolution. Miguel Hidalgo, being a powerful orator, challenged these aspects and called for a direct revolt against the Spanish Empire. In his belief, all classes should have enjoyed an approximately equal amount of rights with possibilities. The ideas of liberty, especially after the American Revolution, provided the much-needed catalyst for Mexicans to rebel. Surprisingly for Hidalgo, the result was way over what the priest expected.
Most historians agree that the movement for Mexican independence began with Father Miguel Hidalgo of Dolores. Hidalgo had been holding secret meetings in the basement of his church, and on September 16, 1810, he rang the church bells and called together Dolores' congregation. Instead of mass, however, he cobbled together an insurgent force made up of farmers and small-town merchants and began a march towards Mexico City. This event is most typically referred to as the Cry of Dolores, so called because the people cried for independence from within the church. Hidalgo's army began small but proved to be very capable, and his cause accumulated an enthusiastic following that grew with each town his force moved through successfully. Upon reaching the town of Guanajuato on September 28th, Hidalgo's army was 30,000 strong. It was there that the largest battle so far for independence occurred and resulted in the death of 500 Spaniards and as many, if not more, Creole slaves. Hidalgo made it most of the way to Mexico City after this battle, but stopped despite his good track record. No one is entirely sure why. Hidalgo's decision to retreat is widely considered to be a strategic failure on his part. Many historians speculate how much earlier independence might have arrived in Mexico had Hidalgo continued to press forward. Once he had issued the command to turn around, Hidalgo's army dissolved into ambitious factions, with rebels taking up land in neighboring towns and instigating insurgent forces of their own. Unfortunately, the division of power proved less effective. One battle, a largely defensive operation at Calderon Bridge, failed spectacularly. Hidalgo and a few of his major conspirators made to escape through the Mexican-American border, but were caught by Spanish forces and eventually executed. Unwilling to let the revolution fail, José Morelos took up Hidalgo's mantle and rallied the divided insurgencies together again. By 1813, Morelos organized the Congress of Chilpancingo, where a constitution, called the Solemn Act of the Declaration of Independence of Northern America, was drafted. Morelos eventually led an attack at Cuautla, which culminated in his capture and execution within the same year. Between 1815 and 1820, most remaining efforts at independence dissolved into guerrilla warfare. Two leaders of the guerrilla forces were Pueblo and Vincent Guerrero. By 1820, the rebellion had hit a stalemate, and the Spanish had the capacity to outlast local rebels. Therefore, drastic action was called. Enter General Iturbide, who was loved by the Mexican Catholic Church and in favor of a new state provided it followed three guarantees. 1. Mexico would be an independent monarchy governed by a transplanted King Ferdinand, another Bourbon prince, or some other conservative European prince. 2. Creoles and Peninsulares would enjoy equal rights. And 3. The Roman Catholic Church would retain its privileges and position as the official religion of the Guerrero and Iturbide were initially at odds, but joined forces by early 1821, and their cumulative force encouraged the viceroy to resign. By the 24th of August that year, the Treaty of Cordoba was signed, allowing Mexico its independence.
The Mexican War of Independence had finally come to an end in 1821. Particularly in relation to Mexico itself, the war failed to deal with the land reform that was promised in the 1812 Constitution. Thus, eventually, it led to the Mexican Revolution that occurred from 1910 to 1929. Yet, generally speaking, the Mexican War of Independence was the initial sparking event that caused independence movements throughout other regions and nations of South America. Despite the European countries' efforts to keep their colonies in a united form, with time, each country in South America gained its independence from Spain. It had occurred in the following order: the First Mexican Empire, then Great Colombia, followed by the United Provinces of De la Plata River, Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. Bolivar's dream to create the United States of South America failed in the Panama Congress of 1826. A failure was due to the fact that many regions in South America were impoverished after the independence wars. Since the disappearance of trade monopoly and protectionism, these nations simply couldn't compete with the standards established by Europeans. In conclusion, it must be stated that the main impact of the Mexican Independence War on its neighboring countries was the influence for further revolutionary movements.